Hello, everybody watching this video. I'm Suzanne from UNHCR. We are very grateful to have Sarah Marmuri, the producer and editor of We Are Not Princesses, to share with us here. Sarah is an Emmy-nominated documentary filmmaker and editor who has explored a diverse range of topics for almost 20 years. In this Q&A, we will learn more about what she thinks while editing the film We Are Not Princesses. To begin with, I would like to ask, do you expect your film to be shown in Hong Kong, and what expectations do you have when making this film?
You know, one of the things that was incredibly important to us when we made this film was that it be seen as broadly around the world as possible because we believe that it is an issue of global importance. But did we expect that we would get to show at the UNHCR? No. I mean, we're delighted to be here and thank you so much for having us. It was really important for us to get this message out and to really open up these conversations about what it means to be a refugee, especially given that this is an ongoing problem with so many different nations in the world.
Yeah, I think it's a very special occasion that we can have all the directors and film producers from across the globe to share with us their films and to raise the awareness of refugees issues in Hong Kong and Macau. And as you know, as I know that you have worked on films covering many social and international issues, could you let me know why you started this project and decided to support the production of this film about how Syrian refugee women heal from the traumas they experienced through the Greek play Antigone.
When Bridget Auger, the director, one of the directors, reached out to me about this film, I was very drawn to this subject. I had actually just finished a film covering the revolution in Tunisia, which is where I'm from. But so many films that have been coming out around this time had been focusing more on the war and not about the ongoing pathway towards some sort of healing and coping that can be found. And when she told me about the camp that basically the plays that were being put on and how they worked with the women to provide them with a mechanism for healing, therapy provided to the actresses and things like that. I knew that it was a different approach to telling the story, and it was really looking at what are the ongoing effects of these traumas that the women were facing. And so I felt that it was approached with a lot of heart and thoughtfulness and caring. And so I was very drawn to the story, and I really was delighted to be part of the project.
Yeah. Can you also tell us when did you start following this project? Because I know that it takes like months or even years to prepare for a drama. So I think this project is like a very long-term one that can allow people to have time to reflect on the script and also their own experience. So
Mhm.
do you join this at the very early stage, or is what like in the middle of it, so that you were like following the whole thing for how long?
Yeah. As an editor, I often don't get contacted until the entirety of the film all the filming is done, all the cinematography is completed. And in this case, that was definitely what happened. Bridget and Itab had finished filming already and had begun putting together just a short sample to show what they already had, but they needed an editor to come on board and they needed an editor who spoke Arabic fluently. And so Bridget and I knew of each other from previous projects, and she reached out to me about, I would say, maybe even 6 months after they'd finished the principal cinematography. And that is when she brought the film to me, and she and I began watching what there was and what they'd filmed. And as I said, the 20-minute sample was already very engaging, and you could see the character and the strength as well as the humor of the women, the principal characters in the film.
Yeah, so this movie actually focuses a lot about the Syrian refugee women. And this year is the 10th year of the Syrian crisis. And after this decade of war and violence, half of the Syrian population has been forced to flee their homes. And among them, there are lots of women, and their children are facing protection risks. including access to education and healthcare. Before taking up this task of helping with the production of this film, did you get to know something about Syria, or were you also very concerned about the Syrian crisis?
I mean, yes, I was very concerned about the Syrian crisis. I knew I had been following what was happening because since the revolution started in Tunisia, all of these revolutions were happening all over the Arab world. And so we were definitely following the ongoing crisis. I also worked on another documentary before We Are Not Princesses that was about Syrian refugees as well, called Twice Upon a Time, where we were telling the story of a 12-year-old boy who had was a refugee in Lebanon as well. And so I'd already very much been sort of living in this space. And so this was just a different approach to telling that story. Um, One of the many stories that can be told about Syrian refugees, I think.
Yeah, and this film actually focuses more on the Syrian women. How do you find the difference between like editing this film versus the previous one you have done?
Yeah, one of the things I did find out working on this was how the impact on women, especially of being a refugee, is even more uh, kind of a more negative and problematic than men being refugees, and that this is a problem that can be seen in the refugee camps as well as the problems that can arise for women specifically, and I think women and children are even stronger. And so that was something that when I was looking at it, watching what happened to the women in our film and their way of the worlds that they had to navigate and the things that they had to learn and the new situations that they were put in. And I think many people around the world think that, well, Lebanon is just a neighboring country. How can it be such a difference? But these women had a culture shock to deal with, and it's not just living in a different Arab country, but it's also living in the refugee camps. Even in this case, they weren't in actual camps; they were in buildings, but they're still serving the purpose of being camps, and it's a very different experience. And I think that seeing how the women had to the challenges these women had to face, I think it was really a different film altogether than telling the story of a young boy being a refugee.
Yeah, and we also know for many Syrian women, life as a refugee has meant becoming the main breadwinner and caretaker in the family, for away from their communities and the traditional sources of supports. And as featured in this film, the theater workshop for the Syrian women in Peru helps them process their traumas and find strength again. And this is
Mhm.
so important to many refugee women. While many of the other films and footages available focuses on the ongoing wars happening in Syria. This documentary is very special that it sheds light more on the long journey of recovery of these Syrian refugee women. And apart from the clips showing their practice and their reflections on the play, we also see lots of clips showing how their daily lives in Lebanon. While sometimes they talk about their past experiences and pains, all these things just intertwine to reveal the complexity of their lives. As refugee women from a country with ongoing wars, could you tell us how you select and arrange these clips during the production?
Yeah. Do you mean how we selected the women in the film, or how we told the arranged the storytelling?
I think both of the parts
Uh,
are interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll begin by telling you the process of selecting the women. I mean, Open Art Foundation is the organization that was putting on the play, and they put out notices in the refugee camps saying that they were looking for women to come take part in this process, but it was a paid process. So this was an opportunity for these women to actually, as you said, become the breadwinners in their families. And this was something that was not available to them. And I think in many cases, the husbands, fathers, and the men who often make the decisions in these families thought that it would be beneficial for the women to participate in this because it was allowing them to make a salary. In the process, we had a large number of women show up, and but not all of them were all right being filmed. The filming wasn't necessarily part of the agreement, and so then it became this process of trying to figure out who were the women that it was all right to film and are all right to be on camera. And then as we filmed them, it became kind of apparent there were these women who were very outspoken and very comfortable and very just came alive with the cameras there. And so those became by default the women that we focused our storytelling process on. We did have the women whose stories became animated, women who really did want to tell their stories, but they were not permitted by their families to be on camera. And so in those cases, we knew early on that we were going to be trying to find a way to allow them to have their voices heard without in any way putting them in a problematic position with their families. And so that was an early thing that we knew when we began the editing process. So as we began editing, we kind of worked with these pieces that we knew we had, and we definitely played around with chronology. We didn't tell the film in a very chronological manner because we knew that we had these pieces that we wanted to highlight and that it was more effective to tell them in a certain order, feeling the emotions of the film and making sure that there was enough knowledge so that when you got to these emotional moments, you felt the weight of them. And so then it became sort of a little bit of a puzzle of figuring out if we are going in this direction, how do we lay out the pieces in order to sort of set the stage, as you will, so that they pay off when we get to the later scenes.
Yeah, as you just mentioned that some of the interviewees they could not show their faces because of their family rejection or just simply maybe in their culture it's not that appropriate like in the cultural sense for them to just appear on camera. So as you said that animation was used in the film to protect their identities and also let them to be heard. Um, what were your considerations when choosing the style of animation? Because I've also
Mm.
find it very, it's quite lovely, but in the sense that you still have some room to imagine the details happening there. Like it's not like the super realistic style. So
Mhm.
how do you choose the style of animation to be used in this film to depict this women's stories?
Yeah, I think Bridget very early on had a clear vision about that. And when she came to me, she was interested in working with me because I had had experience animated working with another documentary that was this hybrid of animation. And one of the things that we spoke about really early on is that we wanted it to have a sense of magic realism. We felt that there's so many films that were being made, especially at the time, about the war in Syria, and using archival footage is very jarring, and we wanted this to take space in a place that allowed to feel the emotions without having it turn into that unfortunate thing that happens that we call something like war porn, but it's that showing this horrible situation that immediately puts people in a certain place and doesn't allow for necessarily feeling and hearing things on an emotional level. And so we knew that the stories of the women who weren't allowed to be on camera had to be animated, but we also wanted to use it to reflect memory, and we wanted it to have, therefore, sort of this ethereal and tangible feeling that memories can have. So, for example, in the scene where Mona is taking her boy to the hospital, we didn't want that to be to feel to use any archival footage to show the actual war, but we wanted us to be able to just focus on Mona's voice and the emotions that we were feeling. And so moving it into this sort of magic realism, beautiful, even though it was such a sad moment, animation space we felt was more effective. Now, we had begun storyboarding and making sketches and showing how we wanted them to be a small element of fantastical and magical in it. And we developed early sketches, and then we were really fortunate to meet with Norlum who did the actual animations with us. It's an organization that an animation studio, and I mean honestly, we were blown away with the work that they were doing, and they really got it. They really understood what we were trying to go for, and were really able to just develop this thing that had this sensation that was both beautiful, even in these moments of tragedy and difficulty.
Yeah, that's very impressive to see all how the animation supports the whole documentary to tell different women's stories, especially when many of them are facing difficulties to be in front of the camera. And in addition to animation, I also spot that a music video is included in the later parts of the documentary. And personally speaking, the rap of the lady's voice really surprised me, as it is so powerful and the lyrics are very impressive. Even though I don't really speak Arabic, but I can provide one of the lines in English translation here to show how well written to the audience watching this video clip. So one of the lines here is, uh, my thoughts are shattered. I'm afraid, hesitating, one step forward, the next into the unknown. So, can you tell us more about the story behind this piece of music?
Yes. So Isra, the woman who did the rap, actually wrote that. She had rapped previously before she even started this theater program, and it was something that had come up frequently um, during the play. And when they were putting on the play, she had thought of writing her own story using by writing a rap. Um, we didn't record it at the time. It wasn't filmed at the same time as the rest of the project, but we did record her sort of practicing some other raps she had done about her background. She's of Palestinian origin, had been her family had been refugees to Syria already, and here they were again becoming refugees a second time. And so she had composed this rap, but we didn't have a good recording of it. And as we were editing, we kept coming back to it because we had her practicing different raps, and we'd be like, we would really love to have this moment of her doing the rap of this story. And she had told us the story of the shoes, and that's what was in this rap that she had written. And so we were able to go back and have her. At that point, it was after she left Beirut because she moved to Germany. And in Germany, we were able to produce it remotely from the United States and have her record this rap and work with it and incorporate it into the animation sketchbooks to be able to make it stand alone. And I love that rap. I think it's so wonderful, and I think she did a wonderful job of it. She had an idea of what she wanted the melody to be in the background, but then our fantastic composer Kaveh worked with her rap, and then he composed something, making sure that he was being true to the song that she was composing to kind of give it the right feeling. And then similarly in the translation, she wrote these fantastic lyrics. I wanted to make sure that we were able to translate them as well as possible to get the meaning and the impact of them across. And so that was a scene that we worked really carefully trying to make sure that our translation was powerful enough to match the strength of what she had written.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Like, I really love that song, and I also hope that the Chinese subtitle is working well in translating what is it. Um, I just came across something in my mind at the same time while you were sharing about some refugees being the second time, like
Mm.
second time as a refugee. Actually, just as a background information for people watching this video, many refugees not only lose their shelters when they're forced to flee from conflict and violence, they also lose the connection with their homeland or even their loved ones. And just as what Sarah just shared, many of them sometimes they experience another time of displacement, and this is really doubling their traumas. And 10 years of the Syrian crisis have inflicted unimaginable human suffering and pain. Although it takes time to heal the shattered minds, many refugees are trying hard to rebuild their lives with with the very limited resources they have. Of course, they have unlimited and immense resilience in the process that we always see from them. And in the documentary, we see the human faces of these refugee women, and we really love how you arrange the clips and also make use of the animation and music to show that and remind us that these refugees are actually no different from anyone else. And moving to the next question we have, in the early part of the documentary, it shows how some of these Syrian refugee women free themselves from the traditional perceptions of how women should behave under their societal norms. So I think the rap actually is a part of it. Like, I believe in Arabic countries, there are like some expectations on how women should be. They should not like be rapping or showing their voice in such a way. And some of them are also smoking cigarettes and wearing makeup. I think these are the things that are discouraged in their culture. So, are there any particular reasons you choose to put this part about their rebellion against the patriarchal authority at the beginning of the film? And how do you personally think about them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there is so much complexity to this issue and what rebellion means and what rebellion looks like. And the two scenes we open the film with, both the opening scene of Isra practicing Antigone and then yelling at the loud motorcycle that's interrupting her, and then after that Mona smoking and her husband telling her she shouldn't smoke and she shouldn't take off the makeup. The reason we wanted to use those early on is because first of all, they sort of established the character of the women pretty quickly. Like the early scene with Isra kind of gives a laugh, which we wanted our audience to know it was going to be okay to laugh, even though this is a film about many tragic topics and challenges. But also there are these moments of levity that are so important for us to continue being human, right? But then with Mona, it felt like a really good introduction to her, because even though her husband is telling her these things she shouldn't be doing, ultimately she doesn't really listen to him. And so it becomes it's this bickering thing, but she kind of talks around him, and he keeps being in some way his attempts at squelching that personality that she is keep being defeated. And so she makes an effort to attempt to remove the makeup, but the makeup doesn't come off. And then, when he tells her she shouldn't smoke, she's like, "You're being ridiculous." And so we wanted to show that rebellious spirit as much as we could, and because it was something that these little rebellions are something that keep coming back up through the film. Fedwa talks about it when she talks about letting her hijab slip and how she shows her hair. And I think that and then even at the very end of the film, they're sort of joking about what could they do that wouldn't necessarily be what is considered proper. And so it was really important for us to show these ongoing little rebellions, but also to think about what it means, what rebellion means. And obviously, smoking cigarettes, health reasons aside, might not be the best example, but they are little rebellions that they choose for their comfort. And so it was really important to include them. And it was interesting because I don't know about with your audience, but American audiences keep saying, well, why would you show the cigarette smoking as like as making it seem like it's a positive thing because Americans are so against smoking? And we're like, you have to understand, it's not about whether or not she's doing something that is harmful to herself. It is important as an act of rebellion, and these little moments really do matter.
Yeah, I think there are always cultural difference across the countries. But while watching this documentary, I personally can really understand why they choose this way to express themselves, because when the surrounding it's really tough to women, and you can just choose your own behavior and change and as a way to show your opinion that you're aware that you should be having the control over your own choice of
Hmm.
way of life. So just a remark here, Syrian refugee women not only have to confront their own personal challenges, many of them also face tensions with the host communities. Sometimes we hear from them talking about their experience of harassment or exploitation during their displacement. And these
Hmm.
adds up to their huge emotional distress and fears of direct physical violence as well. We should empower more refugee women, just like what the documentary has depicts, using different ways to increase their access to knowledge and resources, so as to help them to find their strength and build up awareness and confidence in control over their own matters and their surrounding environment as well. So, in your opinion, what are the qualities of these Syrian refugee women that you have seen in this film that you appreciate the most?
I mean, there's no denying that their resilience is just amazing. They go through so many difficulties and so many challenges, and they manage to keep this strong outlook and sense of humor, and I mean the and determination and care that they put into their their families and what they do. And we've we've gone on to work with the refugees not only on this project, but Ita Bazam, the other co-director, has an ongoing project with the women in the film where they are um, providing more employment for them in this sense, and then artisanal thing where they're crafting these beautiful Syrian handmade pillowcases and the embroidery, the traditional embroidery, and selling them, and the proceeds are all going to support these women that are still in Beirut in this camp area. So I think that really it's their ongoing determination and grit through all these challenging times that I think are really amazing and very, impressive and inspiring.
Yeah, that's very true. And we also love to see different people there in different places using their own roles to make the impact to help refugees. And in UNHCR, we also support some handicraft projects, and we have a project called Made 51 that we have helped different refugees located in different countries to make use of the resources they have to produce some handmade products to support their lives so that they can make profits from their handcrafted skills and also these products are being sold to different places so that more people can have better understanding of refugee situations, and they can also read the literature story behind the products they're holding in hand to just put everyone together despite we have been separated by geographical distances. And in Lebanon, UNHCR is also providing cash assistance to refugees to support their lives. And cash-based interventions allows refugee families to allocate resources according to needs. So we have been also trying different approach to support refugees' life. And in the prolonged crisis in Syria, we also encourage all of the people, no matter where you are, to redouble our collective effort to support both refugees and the community hosting them. So, as the last question, we'd like to also ask Sarah for your opinion. How do you think audiences can do after watching this documentary?
I mean, again, this is one of the reasons that we are so delighted to be partnering with someone, an organization like UNHCR, because looking at the breadth of ways that you are supporting refugees and helping by, sharing stories and making sure that the stories are being heard, but also finding ways that can help monetarily support refugees directly. So I think that looking at websites such as the UNHCR website to find out more about what you can do and to educate yourself, for the audience to educate themselves about the situation that is going on and to realize that this is an ongoing problem and there are a number of ways that people can help with little steps. And I think that starting by looking at a website such as the UNHCR to see what actually can be done, there's so many different avenues that people can think of, that I think it's really fantastic.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah, for your wonderful sharing with us here. And for those who are watching this video, if you would like to know more about refugee stories or support our work in UNHCR, you can visit unhcr.org/hk. And many thanks to Sarah once again, and thank you everyone for joining us here.